Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I live in a consolidated county. That means that the city and county governments merged about 5 years ago, supposedly to reduce administrative and infrastructure costs. This is important because services like fire, police, utilities, and trash pickup are now managed by former county officials, not the city officials. Many of these services are also much more inefficient, and some have been outsourced to private companies. My municipality outsourced trash and yard waste pickup a couple of years ago, and the two companies who now do those collections are woefully inadequate, and their services cost more than when the city or county did it. They both have similar sets of rules for what can be put out for collection, take fewer types of waste away, and no longer come 2 days a week as the city once did, but now only come 1 day a week. We're all paying more money for less service. Now that the background is done, here's the story. I did some yard work over the course of a couple of weekends last summer, cutting some limbs, trimming some shrubbery, and cutting down a dead tree in my backyard. Knowing the rules for how much yard waste, limbs, leaves, and such can be put out, I bagged everything that was supposed to be bagged, filling up 3 of them. Things like leaves and small clippings, weeds, and such. The paper bags for yard waste from the big box home improvement stores are what they require, so I use those. I just fill them halfway up so as not to make them too heavy for the waste collectors, even though there are no written weight restrictions. However, if a bag is too full, they will knock it over to spill out the contents so they then don't have to pick it up. I cut the larger limbs down to under 4 feet in length, or they wouldn't be picked up. Anything at all they can do to get out of picking something up, they will do, and they almost always leave a horrendous mess behind when they do pick things up. The pile put out for collection is not allowed to be any wider than 10 feet, nor any deeper or higher than 5 feet, nor may it contain any piece longer than 4 feet. All bags must be placed in a row, no more than 3 feet away from the limb pile. My pile was maybe 4 inches longer than the 10 feet, and only because of the tiny ends of the limbs, smaller than a toothpick, hanging out of the pile. The pile was no higher than 3 feet, and no deeper than 4 feet. In other words, it fell within the size limits, except for a few twigs with leaves. I also had the 3 bags, each about half full of clippings and leaves, all lined up exactly as required, and about 2 feet away from the main pile. They were scheduled to come on a Wednesday, but when I got home from work that afternoon, it was all still there. There was a pre-printed notice on my door that my pickup exceeded the prescribed size limits, and the note said that I would be required to either pay a $300 oversized load fee or reduce the size of the pile by half to make it fit into the limit. This is where the revenge comes in. I had the next 2 days off, so the next morning, bright and early, I got out the hedge trimmers. I trimmed the ends of the pile back to exactly 9 feet in length. After carefully laying those trimmed bits on top of the pile, I went to the backyard, where the limbs I hadn't trimmed up the week before were stacked for the following week's pile, and found 4 long, fairly straight limbs. I removed all the smaller limbs and leaves from these limbs, ending up with 4 moderately straight poles, each about 7 feet long. I marked 1-foot intervals on each pole in fluorescent orange paint and stuck them in the ground, out at the curb in the front yard, at the corners of a rectangle exactly 5 feet wide and 10 feet long. I got out the surveyor's tape, bright pink plastic tape used to mark property corners, and tied it onto and around the stakes at the height of 5 feet. This established a visual outline of the volume I was required to stay within. I made absolutely sure that everything in the pile was completely inside the poles and below 5 feet in height. This required adding almost 2/3 of the remaining pile in the backyard to the stack out front to bring it up to 4 feet 6 inches in width, 4 feet 6 inches in depth, and 9 feet 6 inches in length, and no pieces longer than 46 inches. The pile was almost twice as much material as before. This included some small logs, up to 4 inches in diameter, also each 46 inches long. The limit is 5 inches in diameter, all within the limits of 5 feet by 5 feet by 10 feet that the waste company mandates. I carried each of the 3 bags of clippings to the backyard and filled each of them up as much as possible, while still being able to fold over the tops and staple shut each bag. I also included small 8 to 10 inch sections of the ends of larger limbs for added weight. The bags were now completely filled and weighed more than twice what they had before. I had to use the hand truck to get them out to the curb, they were so heavy. Oh, and all the extra clippings I had generated filled up 2 more bags. So the total was now 5 bags, the company limit. I then went inside, called the company, and very nicely asked that they come to pick up my yard waste since they hadn't done so on Wednesday. The receptionist, Sarah, sounded skeptical. "Sir, our records show that your pile exceeded the size limits," she said. "I understand," I replied calmly, "but I've adjusted the pile now. It's within the limits." Sarah sighed. "All right, we'll send out a truck and crew, but you'll have to pay the fee if it's still oversized." "No problem," I said. "Come on then." They soon arrived, and it happened to be the same crew that normally comes to my neighborhood. The driver, Mike, and his partner, Tom, looked at the pile with raised eyebrows. I pulled a 25-foot Stanley tape measure from my pocket and approached them. "Hey guys, mind if we measure the space to confirm it's within the required limits?" Mike shrugged. "Sure, why not?" We measured together, and they agreed the pile was not oversized. They then proceeded to spend the next 2 hours manually loading it all onto their truck. Oh, and it took both of them to manhandle each of those bags into the back of the truck, too. As they were finishing up, Tom wiped sweat from his brow and muttered, "Man, this is the heaviest load we've had all week." I smiled sympathetically. "I appreciate your hard work, guys. I just wanted to make sure everything was within the limits this time." Mike nodded, a hint of grudging respect in his eyes. "Well, you certainly did that. Good job on the measurements." I thanked them for coming to pick up my yard waste, and they drove off, looking tired but satisfied with a job well done. There was no extra fee added to my bill for that month. Never has been since. Now, I know they got paid for their time, and I know that I had to do a lot of extra work on my day off, but since last August, I haven't once ever had them leave so much as a single leaf on the ground in front of my house. They had to actually do some hard work, with me standing there in shorts, smiling and drinking cold Gatorade while they were sweating. As I watched them drive away, my neighbor Linda walked over. "Wow, that was quite a show," she said, chuckling. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." I laughed. "It's not about getting on anyone's bad side, Linda. It's about making sure everyone does their job properly." "Well," Linda replied, "I think you've made your point. I bet they'll think twice before leaving a notice on your door again." I nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. "Let's hope so. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I've earned myself a nap." The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought buying my dream home would turn into such a nightmare. When I first moved into the quiet suburban neighborhood, I was thrilled. The house was perfect, spacious, affordable, and in a great location. Little did I know that my new neighbor would make my life a living hell. It all started about a week after I moved in. I was out mowing my lawn when a woman marched up to me with a clipboard in hand. She introduced herself as Karen, the president of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association. Without even welcoming me to the area, she launched into a speech about homeowner association rules and regulations. "You'll need to pay your first month's dues immediately," she said in a clipped tone. "It's $200, cash or check only." I was taken aback. "I'm sorry, but I'm not part of any homeowner association," I explained politely. "My realtor never mentioned anything about that when I bought the house." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Everyone in this neighborhood is part of the homeowner association," she insisted. "It's mandatory." "Well, it wasn't in any of my closing documents," I said firmly, "so I'm afraid I won't be joining or paying any dues." Her face turned red. "We'll see about that," she snapped before storming off. I shrugged it off and went back to my yard work, but that was just the beginning of Karen's crusade against me. A few days later, I came home from work to find a bright orange violation notice taped to my front door. Apparently, my grass was half an inch too tall according to homeowner association standards. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. The next week, I got another notice about my mailbox being the wrong shade of black. Then one about parking my car in my own driveway overnight. Each time, I ignored them. Finally, Karen showed up at my door one evening, flanked by 2 other homeowner association board members. "You've racked up over $500 in fines," she announced smugly. "Pay up now or we'll put a lien on your house." I sighed, trying to stay calm. "Karen, I've told you before, I'm not part of your homeowner association. You have no authority over me or my property. Please leave me alone." "We'll see what the police have to say about that," she snarled, whipping out her cell phone. To my shock, she actually called cop right there on my front porch. I could hear her frantically telling the dispatcher that there was a belligerent resident refusing to comply with homeowner association rules. When the cops showed up 20 minutes later, they were clearly annoyed at being called out for such a petty dispute. I calmly explained the situation and showed them my closing documents proving I wasn't part of any homeowner association. The officers told Karen there was nothing they could do since it was a civil matter, not criminal. She huffed and puffed, insisting they arrest me for something, but they just rolled their eyes and left. I thought that would be the end of it. But Karen was relentless. Over the next few months, she called the police on me at least a dozen more times for various imagined infractions. My grass was too long, my holiday decorations were up too early, my trash cans were visible from the street. Each time, the increasingly frustrated officers would show up, determine no laws were being broken, and leave. Meanwhile, Karen plastered my house and car with more violation notices. She sent threatening letters demanding I pay thousands in homeowner association dues and fines. She even tried to tow my car once when I left it parked on the street overnight. I did my best to ignore her and go about my life, but it was starting to wear on me. I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering what she'd do next. I installed security cameras just in case. The final straw came when Karen somehow got a hold of my work phone number. She started calling my office multiple times a day, harassing my colleagues and telling them I was a menace to the neighborhood. My boss was not amused. That's when I decided enough was enough. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in homeowner association disputes. He reviewed all the evidence I'd gathered and assured me I had an ironclad case. We filed a lawsuit against Karen personally, as well as the homeowner association board, for harassment, trespassing, and abuse of process. My lawyer also helped me file for a restraining order to keep Karen away from me and my property. When we finally had our day in court, Karen showed up with a smug grin, clearly expecting to win easily. But that grin faded fast as my lawyer methodically laid out our case. He presented the closing documents proving I wasn't part of the homeowner association. He showed the judge footage from my security cameras of Karen trespassing on my property to leave notices. He had statements from police officers describing all the frivolous calls. The judge was not impressed with Karen's behavior. He lectured her sternly about harassment and wasting police resources. In the end, he granted the restraining order and ordered Karen and the homeowner association to pay me $10,000 in damages. The icing on the cake? The judge also ruled that Karen had to step down as homeowner association president immediately. I won't lie. Seeing the look of shock and defeat on Karen's face as the verdict was read was deeply satisfying. She tried to argue, but the judge shut her down firmly. In the aftermath, most of the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. Turns out Karen had been terrorizing a lot of other residents too. Within a few months, the homeowner association was completely restructured with new leadership. These days, things are blessedly quiet on my street. I can mow my lawn, decorate for holidays, and park my car without fear of violation notices or police sirens. Karen still lives down the block, but she doesn't dare come near me now. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground against her bullying tactics. No one should have to put up with that kind of harassment in their own home. If you find yourself in a similar situation with an overzealous homeowner association, don't be afraid to fight back. Know your rights, document everything, and don't let the Karens of the world push you around. The next one is a petty revenge story. So my mother, 52F, is married to a complete twat waffle of a man who she has been with for 6 years. I can't stand him. He has an ego that can only be rivaled by alpha idiots, lol. He has disrespected me in my own home, telling me I need to start dressing like an adult. I like to dress in what would be considered goth emo attire. When my son was admitted to hospital after a seizure that nearly killed him, I jokingly said to my mother over video call, "I'm sorry I ruined your honeymoon." And his response was, "Well, if anyone was going to, it would be you." This was not said in a joking manner. The audacity of this man! My flabbers were completely gasted that he would say something like that when my 2-year-old son was on a ventilator. But anyway, I digress. I will say that over the 6 years my mother has been with this man, he has made no effort to get to know me or my 3 children, and I've actually only spent time with him a handful of times, and during these times he was incredibly condescending and rude. I helped my youngest sister move out of their house this week after some boundaries were crossed, and my mother devolved into what can only be described as a temper tantrum of epic proportions, i.e. shouting at me over the phone because I was not entertaining her bullcrap. My mother could have her own thread with her ridiculousness. My sister went back to my mother's house without me to pick up some more of her things. My mother was not there. This is important. Her husband decided this is a brilliant time to start berating my sister about how she is moving out and says, "This isn't something you do, this is something that X does," meaning me. Excuse me! Now, I was very mentally ill when I was younger, between the ages of 11 to 15. I'm now 33, going to university where I just passed my first year with distinction and got on the dean's list for excellence. But I've worked so hard on getting better and making sure my children have all the support I never got. I won't lie, I was pissed. This man knows nothing about me at all, including how ducking petty I am. So I have sent him a glitter bomb full of as much glitter and shiny penis confetti as I could order, about 30 pounds worth, and have sent it to him with a note attached saying, "You want to talk about what I do, this is what I do." I should also mention that my mum has repeatedly told me how much he hates glitter and how he thinks it the work of the devil, so I really hope he enjoys cleaning all the sparkly penises. I really wish I could be there to see the look on his face when he realizes that not only do I know what he said, but that he now has to explain to my mother why I sent it. It might not be the best petty revenge, but it warms the petty place in my heart, knowing that he will be finding glitter and penises for months, and every time he does, he will remember not to use me as a bad example because I'll give you a reason to call me one. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Some years ago, I was working for a large corporation. One of the responsibilities of the team I was on was to offer on-the-job training for employees and managers on a number of topics that are not important here. The point is, we took our job seriously and tried to do the best work we could. Among other things, that meant changing the training topics and content on a regular basis to make sure it was up to date with industry standards and what our colleagues actually needed to know. At some point, we were approached by corporate HR. Apparently, our trainings were bypassing most of the central controlling and approval processes, which was creating issues for them. I could understand that. However, these processes were awful, slow, unnecessary, bureaucratic, and HR showed no interest in improving them. There was no way we could follow them without sacrificing our quality standards. I could have outright refused to follow them and created a massive conflict, but there was a better way. We set up a workshop with HR to make sure we understood the processes we needed to follow in detail. Over several exhausting hours, we mapped out every single step that needed to be done by anyone along every step of the way. Flip charts with scribbles and diagrams quickly filled up every square foot of available wall. At the end of a long and exhausting afternoon for everyone involved, I pointed out that we now had a full picture of what needed to be done. Good work, everyone. But we still needed to align on next steps. How would we get there? It was at this point that the HR manager in the room asked whether we could postpone that topic for the follow-up workshop, as everyone seemed to be very tired. Of course we agreed. Funnily enough, that follow-up workshop never happened. Whenever the topic came up, everyone was quick to state how busy they were at the moment and could we delay for a few more weeks. A year or two later, our training program had to end for an entirely unrelated reason, so it didn't matter anymore. So if you ever need to refuse to do something in corporate world, don't say you won't do it. Accept it and make sure it slows to an excruciating crawl. The next one is an entitled People's Story. The title is just as stupid as it sounds. I work at a theater, and we have this one regular who always seems to have a problem when they come in, I've been told. In my theater, we have a reward program, and the one this man has allows him to watch 3 movies for free a week. Older white man, in a classic older Karen look, Hawaiian shirt, khaki shorts, and sunglasses tucked into his greasy white hair, comes into the building. I welcome him in, but he doesn't engage with me. I just think whatever of it. But he turns to my coworker. "You got keys, you look like a manager." But my coworker tells him that he isn't, and I offer to call one for him. He just glances at me, then turns to my coworker to ask him, "Any idea where they could be?" As if I'm not even there, mic in hand. This is when my coworker addresses me to him. I smile because I still need to be hospitable, and I ask what the issue could be so I can relay it to my manager. He asks if we're still playing the movie Coup, and I confirm. He explains that when he went to watch it Sunday, he came in late and missed the first 2 minutes of the movie and wanted to just peek in and be caught up. Today is Wednesday at this point, and when has anyone ever gotten through with saying they just wanted to see a little bit of a movie and walk in for free? Policy is that there is no entry to the theater if a guest doesn't have a ticket, so I said that unless he got a ticket, he could go in, and with his reward tier, he'd be able to do so with his free pass. But then he shows he's already used up all of his passes, so apologetically I said he'd be paying for a ticket. He had this entitled look on his face and just asked for a manager again, and exclaiming again that it's just 2 minutes. Complaining at me and tapping his foot as I'm slowly starting to get a line of people waiting to get in. My manager arrives, and I wish they didn't do this, but allows him to go and see the film as long as they accompanied him so he doesn't sneak a free one. But my manager gets a lost and found call and has to check the back for a belonging. This old man is already booking it. By the time my manager came back to go with him, the old man was already huffy and zooming out the door, having missed the first 2 minutes, again, which was deserved. And as he walked out the door, he said out loud to me, "Maybe try being nicer to people," as I was helping a guest. I so wanted to say something snarky back, but I maintained professionalism. Anyway, that happened, which I think he could have just saved time by maybe finding the intro on YouTube rather than driving down to a theater, wasting gas, going out in the heat. And I'm just saying, people will come in to watch half of a movie when they've arrived late, and this was the first time I had ever gotten this request to see 2 minutes. Also, he was got to come in later that same day, so double gas wasted. When I told my manager what he said, they were shocked and will try to find his account to blacklist him, so there's that. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.